Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Cannon Chat. It's been a little while since we've got around to doing one of these, and please do ignore my shoes on the radiator there. It was quite rainy if you were in London yesterday, so just drying them off in a minute. Tonight, I'm joined by the wonderful Tom Canton of the Gooner Talk. Tom, we haven't done this in a while. It's been a bit too long.
It has. It has. I will need to get you on during the season for sure, pal.
No, definitely. How are things with the Gooner Talk? How's it going, mate?
Yeah, it's going well. I took actually a well-earned rest, it's fair to say, when the season finished, and we've had a few shows since the sort of transfer period started. We talked about Lacazette, we talked about Wenger signing a new deal, and just yesterday we did our first proper show back again. We just talked about all the questions that people got to ask, because usually we don't get round to answering people's questions, so it's quite nice to just say throw as many questions as you'd like, and we just went through and answered as many as we could.
No, that sounds brilliant, mate. Have you got any sort of unique projects lined up for the new season?
In terms of where the Gooner Talk could go, I mean, it's tough with my job. It's tricky to try and get more shows than I do at the moment out. So I'm trying to use the rest of this summer to get as much content out and to try and get in many more different types of shows. So next week, what we're going to do is I'm going to get 4 people on who've never been on a show before. They're people who just like listening to the show, but they've never actually felt the need to come on. So it's quite nice to get some new perspectives on things and get some more opinions.
That's a very good idea, mate. For anyone that hasn't seen the Gooner Talk yet, I implore you to go and take a look over Tom's channel, as well as some of the fabulous guests he has on. Really great concept that he's doing there, and brilliant work you're doing, Tom. I know you're doing quite a bit of writing as well. How are you finding that?
Yeah, no, writing's going well. In the middle of a piece which relates to the Neymar news, which I'm sure we'll come on to in a bit. And also, obviously, all the La Liga stuff is still going on with Outside of the Boot, talking about the top 10 players we should look out for that could have their breakthrough season. So excited to get that sort of stuff out.
It seems a bit mad that when I think I last saw you when we did that interview for the documentary I was putting together on ticket pricing in football, just how... Well, you mentioned the Neymar deal, but everything in football was just massively, massively inflated even more in that time. It's just, I mean, what do you think things like that? I mean, we are going to get on to talking about Arsenal at some point, but just the way football is going with all the money involved in it, what do you think it says about the game itself nowadays?
I mean, if people thought that football was ridiculous in the first place, which it was, and it's ironic because my other half's father is a firefighter, and so we always get onto this debate about footballers earn all this money and he's risking his life to go into blazes and could come out losing his life and isn't getting paid anywhere near the price that these footballers are going out just to entertain us. And I try to explain that at the end of the day, it is all relative to us and the money that we put in by watching it via Sky Sports and BT Sport and paying for tickets and whatever. So it comes around as all relative, but the way that it's inflated in terms of these transfer prices is huge. We just a few years ago we saw Arsenal sign Mesut Ozil for a club record deal of £42 million, and just over 4 years later we're seeing a £200 million deal possibly going through for Neymar from Barcelona to PSG. So is it gone mad? I actually ironically quite see the Neymar deal was actually a cheap deal for PSG to make. If you think about this player is going to be the next serial Ballon d'Or winner, quite possibly, and you think about how much you consider Ronaldo to be worth now and Messi to be worth now coming towards the end of their careers, I'd say that's still more than 200 million. So to get a player like Neymar, who could be that next Messi or Ronaldo, for a 200 million pound fee, I'd say is relatively cheap. So it sounds mad, but I mean, it's just where you put it into context and relative with the rest of football.
I mean, I'm sure we'll get onto it a bit later, talking about the Neymar deal in particular. But I mean, where does it stop with regards to transfer fees? It's absolutely mental now. You look back just 3 years ago where we got Alexis Sanchez for £35 million, and we're seeing players that have got about an ounce of the technical ability that someone like Alexis Sanchez has got going for similar prices. It seems crazy. I mean, in 5-10 years' time, how much do you think players are honestly going to be, being sold for?
Well, I mean, when Paul Pogba went for an 89 million, Wenger turned around and said that we're only a year away from a £200 million transfer, and he wasn't wrong. So if you're going up in that exponential inflation, you're looking at £200 to £300 million transfers happening more regularly in the next 5 years. So it is a crazy game. I think in terms of how it affects England is a lot different because when you talk about the TV deals and you see that the champions are getting around just under £150 million for winning the title, and even all the way down to the team who finishes last are getting just under 100 million from their TV deals. And this is huge, huge money. When you think about the winner of the Champions League gets around 30 million for winning that competition, it's absolutely madness. And so clubs know that all these clubs have got this massive amount of money and they can then charge whatever they like for the players that they still have under the club's contract. And so they're taking advantage of it. At the end of the day, when you look at it, there's more money coming into the clubs, but we're spending more monies on transfers. So has it really changed? Has it really changed in terms of the output and input by clubs? Because they're getting more money from revenue, but then they're having to spend more of that revenue because we know the inflation's going up on players.
Do you think it's necessarily a good thing for football that these massive transfer fees are being thrown around here, there, and everywhere?
Is it good for football?
Do you think it's maybe not for football, but maybe for the spectator? Because even for me, this Neymar deal is exciting. I've never seen anything like this before. We've never kind of seen that transfer apart from maybe, Pogba was a big one, but the first time we saw a player of sheer quality move, who we all thought was one of the best in the world, Ronaldo, from United to Real Madrid, unbelievably big transfer at the time. I mean, this kind of has a similar air about it. Do you think things like that are good for the spectator? But do you think the money that's being thrown about, the hundreds of millions of pounds that's going into it and will continue to go into these transfers, is that good for the game in general?
In terms of the spectator, I think yes, it is good. It's a highlight. It's something to, especially a journalist as well. It's very good for a journalist because you've got a great story to write about. Is it great for the game? No. If you look at the French league and you take PSG buying Neymar for just under £200 million, you've seen Monaco, who won the league last season, have shipped out players and still could be shipping out players if we are to believe the Kylian Mbappe rumours, that could see their revenue just from selling players rise over 250 million quite easily. So that league is going to be butchered by PSG this season. If they manage to put this team together and Monaco can't recover, there is no one that can challenge them for that league title. So if you're a French fan, or if you're a fan of any of the other teams in that league, or even a PSG fan in a way, because yes, it's great to win titles, but there's probably a reason why I know a lot of people I know who live up in Scotland and are Celtic fans would rather watch a lot of Premiership games because it's so much more competitive than going to watch their team. Celtic absolutely trash that league every single year. It's going to be the same with the French league and their fans. They'll want to watch other football because it's just not as competitive. So is it great for football in terms of the competitiveness? No, because you're going to see the big teams with the big bucks being able to buy the massive players, and you're going to see the smaller teams struggling to get as much quality, and the divide between the bigger clubs at the top of the league and the smaller clubs at the lower end of the league is just going to increase and increase and increase.
No, very good point there, Tom. Let's move on to Arsenal because we haven't talked about them yet. The Emirates Cup came to a close this weekend and we came out on top. Somehow we lost the second game 2-1 to Sevilla, but we had a convincing win against Benfica, 5-2, scoreline that I'm sure we absolutely adore. What did you make of the competition as a whole, mate?
I mean, I enjoy the Emirates Cup as an Arsenal fan, as a fan of football, because it allows me, so when I do go, and I have been a fair few times in the last 5 or so years, I've been to the last 3 of the last 5. So I've got to see teams like Napoli play and Villarreal play, and if I had gone this year, which unfortunately I couldn't, I would have seen Red Bull Leipzig play and got to see Naby Keita, who's someone that I'm very interested in. I think it allows fans that can't get to those Champions League matches to see some more footballers that they might not see in the Premier League. So I think for a spectatorship, the tournament's very good. In terms of preparation, I have my reservations about it. Playing 2 games in the space of 2 days, right before 2 weeks before the Premier League starts, and in our case, right before the Community Shield, is that really good for fitness? I don't know. It's not really affected us in terms of winning the Community Shield in the past, because we have the last 2 times we played it. So I think that in terms of giving the youngsters a run about, it's always great. I don't agree in terms of our pre-season before that going to Australia and to China as well. That's just too far, and I think that does create. If you read up on, and it's something that I was taught about by some of the friends of the show and people I've known in the past, that travelling these miles has a massive effect on the body, and it doesn't matter where you travel to or how much football or how little you play, those miles are going to do some sort of effect on your body. So there's a debate there, and that will come around to talking about finances, and we need to go out there for the fan bases who love to see this club play, and they can't come to the Emirates week in, week out because they're thousands of miles away that they live. But the Emirates Cup, going back to that, I think it is still a commercial thing. It is something that ties into obviously the Emirates sponsorship, but it's going to give our youngsters and we're going to go on to talk about Reece Nelson. I thought he was absolutely fantastic.
You mentioned Reece Nelson, but what did you make of maybe a couple of the other players that haven't maybe had as many first team opportunities as maybe they not deserve, but maybe haven't been granted? Callum Chambers is a particular player that I thought for the time that he was on the pitch, he only had about 20-30 minutes, I believe, on the pitch in that first game against Benfica, but really seemed to thrive in that right centre-back role. Unfortunately, didn't get an opportunity in the second game against Sevilla, but Callum Chambers is a player that I think divides a lot of opinion. Still 22 years old. He's got his whole career ahead of him. Very young age for a centre-half. Do you still think this guy has a future at Arsenal Football Club?
Yeah, 100%. We bought him. I mean, we bought him as he was a right back at Southampton, and instantly he turned into this centre back when he came in the Emirates Cup, which I went to, and I first saw him play. And then obviously he had that nightmare game against Borussia Dortmund and also against Swansea, where Montero completely ripped him a new one. And from that point, he was sort of stereotyped and scapegoated by a lot of the fans. And obviously he went off to Middlesbrough last season, where he did extremely well for a team that really struggled and eventually did go down. I think he's got a place in this team. I don't think there's any reason to lose another one of our homegrown players. We've lost Szczesny, who counted as one of those homegrown players this season already. We've loaned him out once already. I think he's got that experience. I think he can look at the likes of Rob Holding and see his progression last season and see that he's got the same amount of quality as Rob Holding, if not even more, because he's coming in with more experience in the Premier League than Rob has. And he's shown that he's got the ability to compete at the top level and play against these top teams. And there's no reason whatsoever why we should sell him. And that, from buying him as a right back to converting into a centre back in this new three at the back, where you play him on the right hand side of those back three, really could suit a niche position for him that we might not have seen before.
The defence is quite an interesting topic, because I think we've got a lot of potential combinations we could play there. We've seen Monreal play at left centre-back. Kolasinac has played quite a few games at centre-back this pre-season. Mertesacker, Koscielny, Gabriel, Chambers, Holding. I mean, for you, it's a question that I've asked quite a few people now, but what would you say is our strongest back three going into that game against Leicester, or even that one against Chelsea?
It's an interesting question. If you talk about whether Mustafi is going to be fit or not, I don't know. But assuming that he is, I think he has to come in. It's the guy that we've spent over £30 million on from Valencia, who has now had a season to adapt to the Premier League. Koscielny's always going to be our club captain. You have to say he's our best centre-back and he's going to start. And then it starts getting a bit interesting about who plays next to Koscielny and Mustafi for me. Because you've got a couple of options. You can either play Mustafi on the right and Koscielny in the middle, and then play Monreal in that left centre-back role, which I really, really like. You've got the option to play Rob Holding or Callum Chambers and allow them to get some experience and be nurtured by the likes of Koscielny and to a lesser extent Mustafi as well. Or you've even got a chance to play Per Mertesacker in a central of those three and put Mustafi and Koscielny either side of him. And that really complements his play, because you think about, he gets a lot of criticism for his pace, that he's an extremely slow player. But Koscielny and Mustafi are far from that. And I know I've had debates with some of the boys on the show about Mustafi's pace, but I know him to be a fast centre-back, and he is. He's got the ability, his stamina, where it comes into question whether he can keep out for the whole 90 minutes. But if you surround Mertesacker with those two key quick centre-backs, it allows him to boost what he's naturally good at, his positional awareness, his timing of tackles, his blocking. Everything that he does there is really well. His link up with the two more deeper centre midfielders, his pass and link up play is really good there. So I would personally try out playing Mertesacker as a central one in those three as club captain. It's nice to see our club captain actually starting. I think that's important in terms of leadership on the pitch as well. And then putting Koscielny and Mustafi either side and seeing how that works.
So would you be playing Koscielny on the left-hand side of the three?
Yeah, obviously he's played in when we played back four on that left-hand side. He's used to playing on not his most natural side on his left foot. So I think he's the more comfortable person to play there.
No, I can understand the logic there. And given the absolutely towering performance Mertesacker had in the cup final, I mean, obviously you can look at it as just being a one-off game, but the fact that he did kind of embody that quality that he's got, I definitely think there's a place in him in this team for him next season. Rob Holding's a player that was absolutely so so brilliant towards the end of last season. And a lot of people think that he's kind of got a God-given right to be playing week in, week out in this Arsenal team next season. But do you think it's still just 21 years of age, he's ready to be playing on a consistent level for Arsenal next campaign?
I think that he's got, and the word is the way everyone uses with Rob Holding is potential. He's got the potential to play consistently in this Arsenal team. It's just about getting the right balance of games, getting against the right opponents, because something that Arsene Wenger fails to do so often is adapt to opponents. If we're playing against the teams who've got these quick forwards, Rob Holding's perfect for that type of thing, because he's got the pace to keep up with them. He's got the movement, he's got the anticipation, and the ability to intercept passes and through balls really well. That is really key to his game. Play him up against some of the players that could bully him, he can struggle, although devil's advocate to that is that against Diego Costa, he performed really well in the cup final. So he's a player that will not divide opinion as much as you might think Callum Chambers has, because he's someone who's very likeable. People think that he should be playing, but I think he's someone that he still needs to be very careful about how we play him. Everyone got on the hype train about Hector Bellerin, for example, and we've seen him slightly dip off in terms of his form. I don't want that to happen to Rob Holding, because I think we've got a really special English centre-back. And I don't want to use the words like the next so-and-so, because people have described him as the next Tony Adams to the club. But he needs to be his own player. He needs to find his own path at the club. And I think that if he remains here, and I'm talking about a player that could remain here for the rest of his career. I know how much he loved Bolton and he left that club after they got relegated, but he could really form his own sort of his bond with the club and his own personality with Arsenal that really could push him forwards to be, you never know, the next club captain.
Yeah, Rob Holding as well. You mentioned there the kind of connection he's got with the fan base. You don't see that too much with some of our other players, and he's really kind of got that enthusiasm to get involved with the fans. His posts on social media, his interviews. He really does seem like a lovable guy, and I sincerely hope that he does. I hope to see out the rest of his career at Arsenal. One other player I just briefly want to talk about, and he's a guy that I made a video on not too long ago. It's Jack Wilshere. He's back in full training, in contention for the Community Shield this Sunday. I believe Arsene Wenger didn't make any point that he was out of the game, so I can only assume he's available for selection. Jack Wilshere, again, another player that is a lot of people really getting on his back this summer. I've really noticed that. For a guy that 4 or 5 years ago was Mr. Arsenal, everybody absolutely adored him. I've seen a lot of people say that they want him to be shipped out of the club. And a big part of me can understand that, given his injury record, given that he didn't exactly set the world alight at Bournemouth last season. A lot of people at 25 years of age have had enough and they want to see him out of the club. He's got a big wage bill on his shoulders, and maybe it is time for Jack Wilshere to go. And as well as that, it could be blocking a potential move for someone like Seri, who we saw got an absolutely amazing assist last night for Nice. So for you, Tom, is Jack Wilshere someone that you want to see remain on at Arsenal Football Club this season?
Jack Wilshere is a huge question mark for me at Arsenal. I don't think that he's delivered enough since being at the club in terms of goals and assists. I don't think he's actually even formed too much of an identity. All that if someone was to never have seen the player before and asked me how I'd describe him, goals and assists wouldn't come into the equation. I'll be talking about he's a player that likes to drive at defences and try and force mistakes and link up the play with short and quick passes. But at the end of the day, we've got players now that aren't playing to that system in our centre midfield. We've got Aaron Ramsey, who can run all day, who likes to take shots from outside the box, likes to get involved in the attacks, and also can run back and keep up with the defence. And we've got Granit Xhaka, who's absolutely fantastic with his vision and can find passes all over the pitch. Jack Wilshere is a different option, but I still can't find this identity of a player in him. All that people talk about him is that he's prone, and I didn't explain him from Gabriel or on the pitch from Manchester United centre backs. And we'll describe. I think you've had your ankle for sight, these frail ankles with you. It's part and parcel of the game. But if at the moment I wouldn't get rid of him, because we haven't got the backup in that midfield at the moment. We just don't. So if we can get someone in, then I'd be more partial to letting him go.
Tom, I'm not sure if someone's kind of cutting through your Wi-Fi router in a minute, but your connection's a bit.
Okay.
It's a little bit here and there. But yeah, hopefully that'll be the end of that. That was quite actually quite demonic from you. But anyway,
okay.
it was quite. From what I gathered from what you said about Jack Wilshere, if it did allow us to bring in a player like Seri that could be a little bit more available for us, that could prove to be a more sturdy option in midfield in a season where, let's not forget, we've got the Europa League as well. We're going to have all these competitions where we're going to need players that we can rely on. But as well as that, I think it's a good opportunity for Jack Wilshere if he can remain injury-free. And I know it's a big, big ask for someone like Jack Wilshere. His injury record speaks for itself, really, that he doesn't really see through a full campaign. But if he can build up his fitness in this team, then I definitely think there's a place for him to be playing regularly in the Europa League. And from that, I don't think there's any reason why he can't break into the first team. A player that's been spoken about a lot, Tom, is Thomas Lemar of Monaco. With Lucas Perez imminently leaving the club, it would seem. Do you think that there's a realistic chance that we can bring Lemar in for a fee of what will probably be in excess of about £50 million? I think I've lost Tom. Yeah, Tom's gone. Anyway, guys, that was... Is he back? I'm not too sure. I feel like maybe someone's coming to his house and someone's absolutely just gone through.
Oh, am I back again? Sorry.
He's back. He's back.
I am back. Sorry. I heard your question. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, that's fine.
What went on there, Tom?
I don't know. It just came up and said that you've lost your connection. So it's because I'm upstairs. Usually I'm downstairs. We've got a conservatory built now, which I now call the podcast room. And so therefore it's much closer to the router. But I've gone upstairs because everyone is downstairs at the moment. So
what's the conservatory built for the podcast? Because that's,
I mean, in my mind, yes. But I don't think the rest of the family thinks that way. But, you know, it's been used more for podcasts than anything else so far. So I'm claiming authority over it.
I'm pleased to hear that, mate. The Gooner Talk making a proper investment with the conservatories. That is... When are we going to get the Cannon Chat Conservatory? I mean, that is a name. That could work.
The Cannon Chat Conservatory. That alliteration is just perfection.
Any brands out there that are interested in the Cannon Chat Conservatory, you know, hit me up. We're looking for sponsors this season. Absolutely no doubt that that's going to happen at some point. But Tom, yeah, where was I? I think
Lemar, we were talking about.
Lemar. I wasn't too sure if
I did hear
my question.
Correct.
You still there, Tom? It's frozen again. Oh god, it's all going wrong for Tom today. We'll give it a few minutes, people. He might come back. I'm not too sure. It's not looking too likely at the minute. Anyway, if you want my personal thoughts on Lemar, if we could get him in, then it'd be a brilliant bit of business for us. But then the question really remains: how is he going to fit into that system that we've currently got going? Will he play in central midfield? Will he play in that two behind the striker? As an out-and-out winger, he appears to be at the minute. I can't really see him playing in that wing-back role that we've got. Maybe not enough. Tom, are you there?
I hope so.
Yeah? Oh, mate.
Am I here? I am here.
Mate,
that's cool.
It's on an absolute madness. I was having to waffle my way through that. Yeah, give me your thoughts on Thomas Lemar before it breaks up again. I've only got a jinx it, haven't I? God almighty. Oh god. Okay. Tom, you there? Oh, okay. This couldn't have gone any better. Yeah, we've lost Tom. As you can see, this is absolutely top quality entertainment, the professionalism that I know you came to AFC Game by Game for. But yeah, I'll move on to that quickly. And I did title this video as a Community Shield preview, and we may as well take a look ahead to that now. In Tom's absence, I'll give you my brief thoughts going into that game. Even though a lot of people see the Community Shield as a friendly, for me, it's a competition that, especially when we come up against Chelsea, we have to take with complete and utter seriousness. It's a piece of silverware. I wouldn't regard it as a trophy, but it's something to play for. It's a way of kickstarting our season in a positive light, and beating Chelsea in the manner that we did not too long ago, about 2 seasons ago. That would be That'd be brilliant for it. Tom, are you back again?
I have gone down to the conservatory, so hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah, that's a lot clearer. I was just talking about on my Jack Jones there, talking about the Community Shield this Sunday. What are your feelings going into the game?
It's interesting. Obviously, we played Chelsea already in the pre-season and we lost 3-0. So it wasn't the most enjoyable of matches. But it's a different match. It's coming up for a trophy, which, if you call it a trophy, most people call it a friendly. But if we can get some good first team action for what we consider to be our first 11, which is Lacazette up front, not Olivier Giroud, which is my personal opinion. But if we can get that first 11 out, finally get to see them in full flow, I know Chelsea could be quite worried. I'm not convinced by their business this summer. Bringing in Morata is, whilst a good signing, isn't a fantastic replacement for what looks to be an outbound Costa. I think the players got a long way to go. They haven't really strengthened as much as I thought as they might have, but that's been more down to the players that they've been going after and other clubs nabbing in there before them. I think they probably would have wanted Bonucci before AC Milan stepped up the money, and I think that it's a case that if Chelsea can get the business like they did last season, this summer, in the last few remaining weeks of the transfer window, they'll be a force again. And let's not just downgrade their team all of a sudden. They do have a good team. But I think that they've not strengthened anywhere near as much as their rivals have. And that goes for us as well. Obviously, bringing in Lacazette is fantastic, but we need more. But it's going to be interesting to see how we do against Chelsea in the Community Shield at the weekend. Could you hear every word of that?
Yeah, no, I got it through. It was after what was the mess that happened before. It was just so nice to hear your voice come through so clearly.
Oh, that's fine. Sorry about
that. Don't worry at all, mate. You mentioned there about playing our strongest team, and I'm in total agreement with you there. We haven't really. I mean, one thing I'd say about pre-season is that we've kind of effectively, maybe partially, made it a bit redundant by not playing our strongest team. I don't think we've honestly seen our strongest 11 play in Singapore or Shanghai, in Shanghai or in Australia. I don't think we saw it at the Emirates Cup. So for me, this is an opportunity, our last friendly game, to play our strongest 11 before we go into that game against Leicester. I do want to see, as you say, Alexis and Ozil, if Alexis is fit, maybe playing behind the striker, who in my mind should be Lacazette. And yeah, I do want to see a few young players as well come into the team. Not to start, but off the bench, Reece Nelson in particular, given the absolutely outrageous goal he scored in training today. I'd love to see him get a chance in the team. And probably the last chance we'll get to see him until maybe the League Cup, because I don't think he'll be getting too many chances in the Premier League. A player that I think, as I would have no problem whatsoever with him coming off the bench if we do allow him the opportunity. One player I do want to very briefly discuss is Olivier Giroud, who came out today. Well, he didn't come out, but it's been reported that he's going to continue with Arsenal Football Club this season. For you, how much of a massive bonus is that for Arsenal Football Club?
A massively underrated bonus. I think that he's a player that obviously divides fan opinion. I feel like every player we've discussed, we've said the words divides fan opinion, which is pretty characteristic about Arsenal fans these days. But he's a player that obviously provides a different option. I'm going to try and talk about Olivier Giroud without using all the cliches that we hear every time someone talks about Olivier Giroud. But he's just a player that brings so much dynamism to the club in terms of an aerial threat. And he's someone that obviously the link-up play and the hold-up play is unrivaled amongst the rest of our players, especially in the final third of the pitch. For me, when you play Olivier Giroud, though, now the two options of Hector Bellerin and Oxlade-Chamberlain, it's how we adapt to our opponents. Lacazette's obviously a starting striker for me, but Olivier Giroud can be really dominant and really dangerous against the clubs which struggle with aerial threats, which struggle with target men up top. And this is where the right wing-back role comes in, the debate between Hector Bellerin and Oxlade-Chamberlain. We know that Hector Bellerin's deliveries aren't fantastic. Oxlade-Chamberlain's, as we saw at the Emirates Cup, are on a different level. But defensively, Oxlade-Chamberlain is a contrast to what Hector Bellerin provides us. So I think you've got to look at it. If we're going to play Olivier Giroud, you've got to start thinking about playing Oxlade-Chamberlain over Hector Bellerin in that right wing-back role. The same goes, and I'm very confident on Monreal's deliveries. And we saw at the Emirates Cup, Kolasinac can also set up a fair few shots as well. So those two isn't as much of a worry. But that right-hand side, if you're playing Olivier, I think that you need to be thinking about starting Oxlade-Chamberlain definitely over Hector at right wing back.
Do you think that's made? Well, it is a good option for us, I'd say, because we could, in Premier League games, our strongest could be Bellerin and Lacazette up top. And then, as you say, I think it's a very good point you make with regards to Oxlade-Chamberlain and Giroud. Maybe play them in Europa League games. But saying that, when have we ever been known to cross the ball to Olivier Giroud?
That's a fair point.
It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But for me, what Olivier Giroud offers to this team in terms of, I think, morale as well. He's a very good player to have. We've had him 5 years now, experience heading the team, coming up to 31 years old as well. I don't think that's going to hinder his performance in any way. He's never been a guy to rely on speed and pace. It's always, now he looks stronger than ever. He looks more powerful. His finishing is becoming, I think he's even, with age, into his 30s, I think maybe he's becoming a better player as well. I think he's really suited to this sort of, dare I say, bit part role in the team, but it's a very important role nonetheless. It's a big part that he plays in terms of coming off the bench, scoring important goals, always pops up when the odds are against him. So for me, big player to have. Really pleased to hear he's staying in. It's interesting, similarly as well, to see how Jack Wilshere will do now he's remaining on the club. But we've already spoken about him. Final thing I do want to talk about is, it was Members' Day at Arsenal today, and I don't know if you've seen some of the videos surrounding the club, but Alexis Sanchez, I don't know if he rather sarcastically kisses the Arsenal badge, but what did you make of that from our Chilean?
I haven't seen loads of the Arsenal Members' Day, but I did see a couple of photos of Alexis kissing the badge. I think it's, I mean, I remember the goal he scored against, was it Stoke, where he then pointed to the ground? Yeah,
Stoke, and he did something similar against Southampton.
Yeah, so it's, I don't know what he's trying to do. Maybe he's trying just to appease the fans. He knows that he knows now that he's got to stay. That's the main thing, that Wenger's so adamant about it that he has to stay. So he has to now turn this corner with the fans. Any fans, and a lot of people have jumped on his back and said he could be a traitor and he's looking like Cesc or Van Persie. And part of me, yes, like, I don't like to see our best players leave, but I understand his motives. Obviously, Arsenal aren't going to be in the Champions League next season. And I think that when you consider a player like Alexis Sanchez's level of football, he should be playing in the Champions League every season. So whether that means that he's going to now this season be a bit here and there, I don't, because I know that Alexis Sanchez will put in 100% wherever he's at. He could be playing for Barnet in League Two or whatever, and he'll still be putting in 100%. He just loves to play football. So that's what gives me more confidence than, say, when we had the likes of William Gallas in a couple of last years of his contracts, and it wasn't that fast. So, I mean, when you consider it's Alexis Sanchez, I think that whilst it's not sarcastic to hit the badge, I think it's more in a way just to try and appease the fans. It isn't necessarily, I love this club with all my heart. It is a case of, for this season, I am an Arsenal player, and you'll see that.
Do you think, I know it's been talked about far too much, and I'm a bit sick of talking about it. In fact, I'm very sick of talking about it. But we've seen on Twitter from various accounts that Arsene Wenger, the club, are quietly confident that he'll sign a new deal before Christmas. How much faith can you put in those rumours?
None whatsoever. I don't. I'm at the classic line of anything, even when we sign players, is that no one believes anything until it's on Arsenal's website. And what I've learned from what comes out of the club and what comes out of Wenger's mouth is that none of it you can take as the truth anymore. It is simply a case of saying, and there was a little photo that was put up of every time that Wenger said that Nasri and Adebayor, Van Persie, and I think even Clichy might have been one of them that were staying. They left, and the dates of when he said this thing, and a couple of months later they're gone. So you can't take what he says as gospel. It's just that's the bottom line with Wenger now. Even his comments about Lucas Perez, like he says that he wants to keep him. For me, how can a man who's not given this guy an opportunity, and when he's even given him the minutes on the pitch has delivered every single time, to say that you still want him, even though you clearly are reluctant to play him in our team, it's just a blatant lie. It's a disrespectful thing to do. I think the way that he talked about his contract at the end of last season was so disrespectful to the fans, and to way to string the club along and the players along and everyone. I'm thinking it was for the best of the club. It wasn't whatsoever. So to come out and say that they're confident of Alexis signing a new contract, at this stage as well, before the season even started, after we know that he clearly has a desire not to sign a deal, otherwise he would have done already, is incredibly arrogant of the club to come out and be like that. And something that really could backfire and really could rub some tomatoes into their faces.
You mentioned there Lucas Perez. Have you seen Arsene Wenger's comments from this morning's press conference about?
Yeah, I did.
Completely contradictory to what he said before.
Yeah.
Completely saying that he's going to let him go. It's
He was like, "Is he going to be here next season?" Yes. Like, I mean, that's what I mean. It's another example. It's just the example that it doesn't matter what he says. Is that you can't believe it. You can't. And I'm not someone who hates Wenger. I'm far from it, completely from it. I've defended him countless times, but I've learned that you cannot trust what that man is saying in press conferences. It is to appease the media, to try and finish the press conference as quickly as possible and to make him feel as comfortable as possible in that situation and not have to face these difficult situations. He'd rather have it all locked up until he retires, and hopefully we will see a book from him, which is where all those secrets will be released.
Now, Alexis isn't the only one that goes into the final year of his contract this season. There's also Mesut Ozil, who hasn't really been talked about enough. I think a lot of people are just, have bought into the idea that he's going to sign a contract at some point. And I'm kind of inclined to be in that camp, given that he seems to be really happy in London. He does seem to have a general admiration for the club and the fan base. And I think he just likes life at Arsenal. And hopefully we can win a league title with him still at the club. Now he's coming up to 29 years old. Time is ticking on for the likes of Ozil, Alexis. But Jack Wilshere, final year of his contract, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Aaron Ramsey, players that could cause somewhat of a ruckus in the dressing room. Mentally, it's not good to be in that sort of position. Do you think it could have an effect of all these players coming to what could be the end of their time at Arsenal Football Club?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about Ozil first. I think it's interesting. You see a difference between a player who's 28 and like Alexis and a player who's 29, and that difference in Alexis has this mythical one more big move. When you look at Ozil, he's going to be turning 30 towards the end of the season, I believe, and when you look at it, that means he's now the mythical wrong side of 30, which then apparently means a player is going to retire soon. But we know Ozil enough now that we know his style is not based around massive amounts of energy being sent across the pitch. It is all about being conservative about how he uses that energy, where he is on the pitch, being explosive when he needs to be. He's the type of player that can go on into his 35 and 36 and still play really, really well. This is just purely my opinion. But just getting nailed down to a new contract now would also almost certainly say that this guy could retire at the club. And if that is the case, we could be getting a player who's retiring the club, who's going to be into his early 30s and still a quality player. So it's majorly important, I think, to now get Ozil signed down to a new contract. And I think it helps because I don't think, ironically, there's many parties quite keen on signing Ozil. He's a very, very particular, specific player that needs a certain system. And whilst, ironically, we've now changed system and it doesn't suit him as much, he has sort of found a newfound freedom in this sort of wider role that's still very much an attacking and needing to find these passes. Who was the other players you want to talk about on the last slide?
Just Wilshere, Chamberlain, Ramsey, and I'm pretty sure there's one or two more that are coming into their final year.
Gibbs as well, I think, is on his last year. So, I mean, Wilshere, we've discussed, and I think that he's someone that, unless we sign another centre mid, has to stay at the club in terms of depth and squad. Oxlade-Chamberlain's a really interesting one. At first, it seemed like we weren't going to offer him a contract, and then you can't hear Wenger come out and say that he has to be at the club. It would be massively damaging if he left the club, and all these links with Chelsea. But he's someone who divides a lot of fan opinion. I don't think he scores enough goals. I don't think he does enough on the pitch. He seems to stand out quite a few times, and that's more down to the fact that the rest of the team aren't performing, and his base level is higher than when the rest of the team doesn't perform. So he divides. I like him, and I hope he stays. I think he's always. It's just that case of, I think that there's a bit of Walcott about him. There's that element about him where we think, oh, in a few years' time, he's going to be great, and never really comes around to being that type of guy. I can see that in Oxlade-Chamberlain. So I think it's important that we keep him, again, for the homegrown factor, again, because he's someone that we've bred up in this club from signing him young from Southampton. He's come through and he's been here for several years now. He's a key member of that dressing room. He's a good character to have around the club as well. And I think that if we keep hold of him, he might be a different player from Walcott in the end, but I can still see that quality of, oh, he'll be good in so many years' time within Oxlade-Chamberlain.
No, I'm in total agreement with you there, mate. Final question. Community Shield coming up on Sunday. We've already briefly talked about it, but what's your score prediction going into the game?
Oh, it's a tough one. It's like, I mean, you could have asked me for the prediction against Chelsea in China. I think it would have been a similar tough decision because these friendlies you just can't tell.
I think both teams will be taking this game with not just a degree of seriousness, but I think they'll both be wanting to be dead set on winning it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think even when you look at the Emirates Cup, I think that the players wanted to go out and win those games. No player goes out and isn't too fussed. But yeah, when there's a proper trophy on the line, and I say proper trophy relaxingly, I'd say that I think we'll go for it, and I think that we'll want revenge after that little 3-0 snipe that they had at us earlier. So I'm going to go with a repeat of the cup final and say 2-1.
I would take that all day long. And on that note, after somewhat of a technical delay halfway through the show,
the conservatory came through in the end.
That's all we needed, mate. That investment going a long, long way in the end. Yeah, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you, Tom, for joining me this evening. Where can people find you on the socials, mate?
You can find me at tcanton94, and you can find the podcast and video podcast that I do, the Gooner Talk, at the GoonerTalkTV.
Yep, as I said at the start of the video, guys, please do make sure to check out the GoonerTalkTV. Make sure to follow Tom on Twitter. Great account to follow there. Great YouTube channel to be a part of as well. Great Arsenal discussion as per usual, because you know, all us Arsenal fans, we're such well-rounded people with very well-rounded and diverse opinions. So yeah, as I say, check out the GoonerTalkTV. Follow Tom on Twitter, and from the both of us, that's everything from us. So thank you all for watching. Great viewing numbers as always, and we'll both be speaking to you. Hopefully we can get Tom on the show again, and we'll be speaking to you very, very soon. See you later.